In Wheelock chapter 12, we deal with the perfect active verbal system and how to do a synopsis. So we are beginning to grow in our skills with the verbal system here in Latin, and we're going to learn the perfect system in this chapter. Let's just remind ourselves of the present system of verbs compared to now what we're learning as the perfect system. The present system has three tenses that make it up: the present tense, the future tense, and the imperfect tense. Now, why are these tenses called or designated the present system? The reason is that they're built on the present stem, which you find in the first and second principal parts. Recall that to get the present stem, in order to create, for example, the present imperative, you take the infinitive from the second principal parts and you chop off the re ending, and you've got the present stem, right? So this is one of the reasons this is called the present system, is that we're using the present stem. And secondly, these tenses index or situate the verbal event in time relative to the present tense. The present tense is described as, or should be described as, the time the speaker utters the clause. All right? So I'll explain that a bit here as we go on in these examples. So, in present tense, the verbal situation is contemporaneous with the utterance. Same time. So when a speaker utters, "I eat" or "am eating chocolate," at the time they say it, the verbal action or situation is going on. Okay, so "I'm eating chocolate" means that at this moment I'm eating chocolate. Imperfect tense, the verbal situation is prior to the utterance of that statement. I was eating chocolate. So when a speaker says I was eating chocolate, the eating of the chocolate precedes the utterance that one was eating the chocolate. And then in the future tense, the verbal situation is following or after the utterance. So if I say I will eat chocolate, at the moment I say it, the eating of chocolate is yet future, right? It's coming after the utterance. And so we're situating the verbal situation to a time frame that is relative to the time of the utterance, either at the same time, before, or after the utterance. Now, in the perfect system, we have three tenses, and then these are the perfect tense, the future perfect tense, and the pluperfect tense. And some people might construe it or call it the past perfect. And these tenses are built not on the present stem, but on the perfect stem. This is why it's called the perfect tense, or one of the reasons. We derive that from the third principal part. We'll talk about that here in a moment. And these portray the verbal situation as completed. That's what the word perfect means in grammar, completed. The verbal situation is completed relative to the utterance time when the person makes the statement, and to a reference time, which is some situation that could be different than the time of the utterance. The reference time then might be the same time as the utterance. So here reference time and utterance time are the same. The reference time, though, may be prior to the utterance, and possibly the reference time could be sometime after the utterance. And I hope these examples will help you understand that concept. So let's think about each of the tenses, just using some English examples, just to get the concept. Perfect tense here. In perfect tense, the verbal situation's completed by the present reference time. So the time of the utterance, in this situation, the reference time and the utterance time are the same. So in my example here, I ate or I have eaten chocolate. At the time that I utter it, which is also what I want to bring to mind as the reference time, and we'll distinguish these in a moment, but here they're the same. The utterance time and the reference time are the same. When I say this statement, the eating of the chocolate is completed by that moment. I ate chocolate. That happened before I said it. I have eaten chocolate. That was completed before I ate the chocolate. Now with pluperfect tense, the verbal situation is completed by some past reference time. That is, some time before the utterance. Okay, so there's the utterance time, and the reference time here is sometime before the utterance. So here's my example. Yesterday when Mom arrived, I had eaten 5 pounds of chocolate. So, mom's arrival, that verbal situation, is in the past, right? Yesterday, mom arrived. That's the past from the time of my utterance. So it's prior to my utterance. And the eating happens farther in the past before the arrival time. So utterance time, let's say, is now. Arrival time is past relative to now, the utterance time. And then the eating of 5 pounds of chocolate happened prior to that past reference time of arrival. All right? It's farther back in the past. And I'm going to use expressions in English like had eaten, had walked, had sat, and so forth. Now, for the future perfect tense, the verbal situation is completed by some future reference time, a time after the utterance. So in this example, tomorrow's future, when mom arrives. So from the time of the utterance, mom's arrival is future to that, but I will have eaten 5 pounds of chocolate by that time tomorrow. Here, the eating precedes the arrival, but both of them are future from the perspective of the utterance. So mom's arrival is future following the utterance, and the eating happens in the future before her arrival. Okay, so these are the notions of the perfect tense. Now we have some basic rules for verbs in the perfect tense, or at least one basic rule, and that is that the perfect stem is used plus personal endings. And it's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the general idea. If you want to form a perfect tense, find a perfect stem and then add whatever endings need to go there. How do you find the perfect stem? You go to the third principal part. And that brings us to our discussion of principal parts. Let's walk through this real quickly. To understand and create verbs in the Latin verbal system, you must know the principal parts. So let's review principal parts of the paradigm verbs we've learned for the 4 conjugations and make sure that we understand what each part represents. Let's go on to our next page here, to the chart of principal parts. This will look somewhat familiar to you. But in the first column, we have, I just identified the conjugation as first, second, third, and so forth. But what I want to point out here is that there are 4 principal parts. 4 principal parts, and the first one, let's number these. Let's just use some Roman numerals, right? That would be appropriate here. The first principal part is the present indicative. Laudo, moneo, ago, capio, audio. Remember, for third conjugation, we have regular third conjugation verbs and third conjugation eo verbs. Okay? And then our second principal part is the present infinitive. Laudare, monere, agere, capere, audire. And here we recall, we chop off the re ending to get the present imperative. The perfect indicative is the third principal part. Laudavi, monui, egi, kepi, audivi. All right, and you'll notice some similarities here with all of them. They end with a long I. And then our fourth principal part is the perfect passive participle. Laudatum, monitum, actum, captum, auditum. All right. Now let's ask some questions here and see if we can answer them. What person and number is the first principal part? First principal part is present, and I didn't actually specify it here, but in these are active voice. The subject is the doer, the agent of the action here in these. What person and number are these forms? Laudo, moneo, ago, capio, audio. These are first singular, right? And then look at the third principal part, the perfect active indicative. What person and number are the ones in this column? You don't know these yet, but as you might suspect, these are also first person singular. So, laudo, present, I praise or am praising. Laudavi is I praised or have praised. Okay, so the form you're seeing is always first person singular in these. All right, now how would I find the perfect stem? I go to this third principal part, and I take the forms, and the I here is the first singular personal ending. And so I'm going to chop that off, and I'm left with my perfect stem. And it's this that I'm going to use to create the perfect, future perfect, pluperfect tenses. So as an example, then, lao dao is going to be my perfect stem. Mo nu is my perfect stem for moneo. Now, what's the gender and number of the fourth principal part, the perfect passive participle? If you look at these forms, this form here should look familiar to you. This is the neuter singular, and these are nominative forms. So you could translate these forms with what would in English be the passive participle: praised, warned, led, taken, heard. Note here that participles are verbal adjectives and can follow the 2-1-2 adjective pattern. So we have the neuter singular form here, but we could provide the nominative form for all the genders. So laudatus, laudata, laudatum would have the sense praised or having been praised. And we could use these passive participles to describe men and women and things as well, okay? But for the paradigm or for the principal parts, what you're going to see is the neuter singular form. All right, now the fourth principal part is going to be, when you see it, is going to be the perfect passive participle if the verb is transitive. Remember, transitive means that a verb takes an object. So if the verb's transitive, when I see a fourth principal part, it will be the perfect passive participle, since only transitive verbs can be made passive. And I have an example here just to help illustrate this. The verb to kill is transitive. I could use it in the active voice with an object, right? John killed the bear. The bear killed John, right? Killed takes a direct object. And then it's that kind of a verb that's transitive that can be made passive, where the object then can be described using a passive verb, and then that object becomes the subject, and the subject is being acted upon. John was killed. Okay, so John's not doing the killing as the subject of a passive verb, but someone killed John. John was killed. But take a verb like to die. To die. This one is intransitive, and I cannot make it passive. Consider the sentence, John was died. That is a passive construction, but it is senseless because die is not a transitive verb. When I use it in the active voice, I never take a direct object with it. I never say the bear died John, right? So I could never say then John was died. So if the verb is transitive, and only if it's transitive, would I find the fourth principal part to be a passive participle, a perfect passive participle. If a verb is not transitive, then its fourth principal part might be replaced with other forms, or the verb just may lack a fourth principal part altogether. You don't need to know what those are right now, so we'll talk about that as we come to it in the grammar. Last point here, on the regularity of the third and fourth principal parts. First conjugation verbs like laudo are fairly regular in their principal parts. Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. O, are, avi, atum. So you find another first conjugation verb, pretty much you could expect its principal parts to follow that. Many second and fourth conjugation verbs follow the principal parts of the paradigm verbs we've learned, moneo and audio. But there's also great variation for the third and fourth principal parts, especially among the third and fourth conjugation verbs. And therefore, you absolutely must memorize the principal parts as part of your vocabulary retention if the forms are unpredictable. And I really do want to stress that, okay? The first part of this being that when you learn the principal parts, you don't just learn the meaning of the verb, but you really need to make sure you know the principal parts. Now, if the principal parts are predictable, don't memorize them. You know the pattern, and you can apply the pattern to that verb. You don't need to take up mental space. But if the principal parts are unpredictable for some reason, then you need to memorize them. Now, the good news here is that as you've learned the basics of what makes a first conjugation verb, you'll always know the lexical form, which is the first principal part, and then if you know the second principal part, the infinitive, that's how you figure out what the conjugation pattern is. So you should always know those first two if you know what the conjugation pattern is and what the lexical form is. So it's really the third and fourth that I'm saying are the places where you're looking for irregularities. And if they're not predictable, then memorize those along with the form. If they are predictable, then just apply the pattern. All right, now let's look at the forms of the perfect system tenses. For all these tenses, again, begin by finding the perfect stem, and you do that by dropping the long I of the third principal part. You've got the stem. Okay, so let's start with the perfect active tense. Add the following new personal endings to the perfect stem when you've got it. Isti, it, imus, istis, and erunt. All right? Now, I have a really stupid memory device for this, and I'm not even sure I like it. But down on the bottom, you have a little note. So you can say, here's, of course, we're not pronouncing these the way the Latin would be, which is isti, right? But just imagine me from Mississippi with my thick southern drawl. Sometimes we take vowels and we take a one syllable vowel and we can stretch it into 2 syllables. So it sounds something like this. A, ast, iet, amus, astes, a rent. Okay, so a, ast, iet, amus, astes, erant. All right, so there you go. It's dumb, but maybe it's dumb enough to make you remember it. Maybe dumb enough to make you forget everything I just told you. All right, now, I want you to notice here that the third person ending seems unusual given the I forms and the other personal endings. Every one of these has an I immediately after the stem, except for erant. So you got to remember that, okay? That's the weirdo in the list of 6. So it's the runt, as it were. Okay, so here are the perfect active personal endings. Again, you just got to memorize these. These are new. Really, once you know, though, the third principal part, you've always got the first one, right? And then it's just a matter of knowing the rest here. So I, isti, it, emus, istis, erunt, and there is an alternate form that's used in poetry fairly regularly, but only used a few times here in the Wheelock grammar, ere for third plural. So we're really going to focus on that one. Okay, so we take laudau, right? Remember our laudawi is our third principal part, and we're dropping the I, and we're left with laudau, and now I just add the endings here. Laudawi, laudawisti, laudawit, laudawimus, laudawistis, laudawerant. So we would translate these again as I praised or half praised, you praised, half praised, and so forth. All right, so for ago, what was our third principal part for ago? It was egi, okay? Egi. So how do I get that present stem? I take egi, chop off the E, and I've got egg, right? And then I add these endings. Egi, so I led or have led, egisti, and that's a you led or have led, egit, egimus, egistis, egerunt. All right, and then for sum, our third principal part is e, and so to form the perfect stem, I drop the e here, and then I'm left with the stem to which I add these personal endings. So e, I was or I have been. Isti, you were or you have been. It, imus, istis, eront. All right, so let's go on. The pluperfect active tense. In effect, the pluperfect active tense is the perfect stem plus the forms of eram, the imperfect of sum, to be. Remember, I was, you were, he, she, it was, right? We're just using the eram, eras, erat forms. So, laudau plus eram would be I had praised. Now, if we take the perfect stem laudau as representing the completed action of having praised, and we take the imperfect eram as I was and put them together, it would be sort of weird, but it would be like saying I was having praised. What does that do? It situates something in the past and then having completed the praising before that time in the past. So I was having praised would then mean I had praised. All right, so this is completed praise prior to some time in the past. So here are the forms. And this is fairly easy, provided that you remember the imperfect of sum. Okay? Eram, eras, erat, eramus, eratis, erant. All right, so we take laudau again, and then we're just adding exactly these forms. So you can repeat after me. Laudaueram. So I had praised. Laudaueras. That's you had praised. Laudauerat. He had praised. She had praised. It had praised. Laudaueramus. So we had praised. Laudaueratis. So y'all had praised. Laudauerant. And that's they had praised. Okay, so again with ago, remember egi is my third principal part. I drop the I, egg, and then I'm just adding eram, eras, erat to it. So you can repeat after me here. You ready? So egeram, egeras, egerat, egeramus, egeratis, egerant. And then fui is our third principal part. Drop the I, we have fu, and we're adding eram to it. So fu eram, fu eras, fu erat, fu eramus, fu eratis, fu erant. All right, so I had been, you had been, and so forth. Now let's look at the future perfect active tense. In effect, to form this, what are we doing? We're using the perfect stem plus ero, which are the future forms of sum. You could have predicted that, right? But this is important. This is a big but here. The third plural of sum, which is erunt, changes to the I vowel that's present in the other forms. So it becomes erint instead of erunt. If it didn't do this, then it could be confused with the perfect active indicative third person plural, laudawerunt, laudawerunt. So for example, let's go back over here. Here's that laudawerunt, right? That was our perfect. That would mean laudawerunt, they praised, or they have praised. And if I was using the erunt form of the future with this, then I'd get laudawerunt. Okay, it would look like this, laudawerunt. Okay, and that would presumably mean they will have praised, right? But that would be really confusing because laudawerunt with the long E is they have praised. Past tense, right? They will have praised. That's future, okay? So we don't use this. We use the I. So instead of the U here, okay? All right, so laudawero is I will have praised. And if we take that perfect stem, laudao, as representing the completed action of having praised, and the imperfect ero as I will be, and smash them together, I will be having praised, then it might help us to see that I will complete the praise prior to some time in the future. The will be is future, the having praised means that the praising is completed prior to that future time. So, if that's helpful, you can think of it that way. So here are the forms. Okay, so remembering the future of sum, I will be, you will be. Let me just read these and you can remember. Ero, eris, erit, erimus, eritus, erunt. Again, don't forget that in the real future, it's got a U here, erunt. But in the actual form of the future perfect, we get the I instead. All right, so let's read these. So laudao is my perfect stem, and I'm just adding ero. So let's read these. Laudawero, I will have praised. Laudaweris, you will have praised. Laudawerit, he, she, it will have praised. Laudawerimus, we will have praised. Laudaweritus, y'all will have praised. And laudawerint, they will have praised. Okay, so with ago, egg is our perfect stem. We're just adding all the forms of ero with that special modification here. So we could say these together. Eggero, egeris, egerit, egerimus, egeritis, egerint. So I, you, he, and so forth will have led. And then for sum, we would translate these as I will have been, you will have been. So fuero, fueris, fuerit, fuerimus, fueritis, fuerint. All right, so the meaning of the perfect tenses. Just a few more comments here, some final comments on the semantics. To use the perfect stem is to portray the action as having been completed. Having been completed. So for the perfect active indicative, the verbal situation can be pictured, one, in summary form as a simple snapshot, represented in English by the simple past, I ate, for example. Two, a second way to construe it is that it's portraying action as having been completed with ongoing relevance for the present reference time, using the English present perfect tense. I have eaten. You have eaten. He has, remember, have becomes has in third singular. He has eaten. So the Latin imperfect tense, on the other hand, represents the past tense action as progressive, ongoing, or habitual. I was eating, I would eat regularly, I used to eat. So we have two past tense forms in Latin. The imperfect is unbounded, progressive action, or habitual, and the perfect tense is past but completed. Now, for the pluperfect active indicative, the completed action in the past has relevance for some later reference time in the past. Okay, so in English, we will want to use what would be in English the past perfect tense. I had eaten a 24-ounce steak when I barfed all over my roommate. So the barfing happened in the past, but the eating of a 24-ounce steak came before that time in the past. Before the barfing, I ate the 24-ounce steak, and it certainly has relevance to the point in time when I barfed, right? So I had eaten precedes the barfing. Both of those, though, are past tense from the perspective of the utterance itself. And then for the future perfect active indicative, the completed action in the future has relevance for some later future time in the future. And in English, we use the future perfect tense. So I will have eaten a 24-ounce steak when I barf all over my roommate tomorrow night. So the utterance time is now. The barfing is tomorrow. But tomorrow when I barf, I will have done the eating right before the barfing. Okay? And of course, the eating of the steak is relevant to the barfing. Okay, last thing. Synopsis. Instead of giving full paradigms of a verb, it can be helpful to test your knowledge of verb forms by providing a synopsis of verb forms. That is, a synopsis is a listing of a representative form from each of the tenses. For example, here I provide a third-person singular synopsis of the verb ago in all 6 tenses in the active, indicative forms. So active voice, indicative mood, and then going through the 6 tenses. So here we go. Agit, be translated he leads, that's present. Future, aget, with the E, he will lead. Imperfect, agebat, he was leading. The perfect, agit, using different stem, right? Not ag, but ag, he led or has led. Future perfect, agerit, he will have led. And pluperfect, agerat, he had led. Remembering eri versus era for our future versus imperfect of sum. All right, so hope that helps.